Good evening. This is the Guilford, Connecticut Board of Education. It is Monday, February 5th, 2024. We are gathering tonight for a Board of Ed special meeting to vote on the proposed budget for the 2024-2025 education year that has been proposed to us by the administration. We have, in the process of these deliberations, had a number of steps. We received this budget at the beginning of January. We held several meetings throughout the month. We had two public forums on January 22nd and 23rd, in which the public was invited to come and give their input on the budget. Throughout the month, we have received a number of email communications from the public as well. We met last Monday, January 29th, to start to discuss the budget. At that meeting, we did also get an in-depth presentation by Dr. Freeman and our athletic director, Jake Jarvis, on athletics. So tonight is our opportunity to sit down and make deliberations, talk about aspects of the budget that we think might be able to be reduced, identify if any board members are interested in discussing any additions, and then come to a consensus on what the final budget will be that we then forward to the Board of Finance. I will note that we have several responsibilities here. Certainly the utmost is to support and maintain academic excellence in Guilford Public Schools, to make decisions that support student learning, to make decisions that enhance the programs that we want to provide to our students to help them reach their potential. We also have a responsibility to make these considerations responsibly in a financial way as well. We identify and recognize that the Guilford community taxpayers support us. We are extraordinarily lucky in Guilford that they support us in a large number of ways, in numerous ways, as volunteers in the school, as Booster Club members. They support us at theater arts programs, at music programs, at sporting events. There are just numerous ways in which we are grateful for this community, and we want to make decisions responsibly with them in mind. So, all of that being said, I will note that we've had a number of discussions at our board meetings over the past couple of weeks around things like enrollment and staffing. We've had some discussions about safety monitors. We've had a number of discussions around various other items throughout the budget. And it's our opportunity tonight to deliberate. Obviously, Dr. Freeman and the administration is here if we have additional questions. If, as we're considering reductions and we want to seek some guidance from Dr. Freeman on things that he might suggest we prioritize, we have the opportunity to do that as well. I am going to take a pause and turn to you, Dr. Freeman, and ask if you have anything you want to say as we begin our deliberations.
I would only add for the community, the viewing community, that in addition to the live conversations that you've hosted here that they've been invited to, that the business office has also responded to approximately 50 questions that were submitted in writing by the Board of Education as part of that ongoing conversation as well. We are here to help you with your deliberations in any way possible. I am acutely aware of the fact that every year the budget that we deliver to you is a draft, and I think in some ways this year's draft was less complete than in other years. There were some big questions that we pointed out to you when we talked about additions and possible reductions moving forward, and we've had those conversations. I think those have been positive and healthy conversations. That doesn't mean that the board isn't left with some big decisions as the administrative draft becomes your final budget, and we then take that forward collaboratively to the Board of Finance. We're happy to respond to questions, or I'm happy to distribute a list of some areas that we think could be looked at as possibilities, areas of action for the board. The list, if we look at it, is longer. I'm not happy about any of the items on the list. I'm not pleased to be suggesting of any of them as areas of reduction, but we can speak to each of them. We can help make recommendations around each of them. I would just suggest that the list, I'm not suggesting that we take the whole list. The list is longer than it needs to be so that the board has options. It's not to suggest that I think we should be cutting everything on this list. In no way are we making those suggestions. We recognize that our draft usually comes in higher than this board or the Board of Finance thinks is supportable and something that we can move forward.
Is there a list that I missed?
No, I
No.
brought one with me.
okay.
And generally,
No,
I try to
no,
put
sorry.
something together in the form of a worksheet,
Right.
and I'd be happy to pass it around if people want to use it to track the conversation. And again, I'm happy to speak to each of the items on the list. Also, each of the items tends to be, it's a range. There are dollar amounts associated with them, but for instance, when we talk about multiple para FTEs or multiple safety monitor FTEs, the board knows that there could be no reduction, there could be a complete reduction back to zero, or there's room within that to make partial reductions. So I'm just always cautious about sharing a list like this one because we don't want to add it all up and go right to the bottom line and call it a short meeting.
No, and I think the only thing I'll add to what Dr. Balistraci said is we've had the opportunity to caucus, which we do every budget season, and so I think this list goes along well with what we've come out of caucus with, so that we could kind of see where there's any alignment and see if we could start the discussion there.
And I think you'll see that almost every item on this list has been discussed. I think there's a couple new items, and I'm happy to explain what those are and why they appeared on this list of suggestions that we distributed here tonight.
Dr. Freeman, because, as you literally just said, most of these look like, or many of these look like things we have discussed, but some are not. I notice you have on the list a pension item for $21,000. That seems particular.
Yes, that is very specific, and it is the first item on the list because I think it might be the only one that's easy to discuss tonight. So we mentioned to you over and over again that we begin the budget process very early in the schools. When we put together the draft that we provided to you, we had a budgeted pension increase, and that was based on what we were anticipating the budget committee in town to recommend. The recommendation did come through, and in fact, it was $21,000 lower than what we had built into our budget. So we can take that reduction, and we are still following the recommendations of the budget, of the pension committee here in town. We see no reason not to take that as a reduction.
Okay.
And you, summer pathways, is that reduction the entire program or the increase to the current program?
No, that is the program, and that is a new item on the list tonight. So as we think about 3 years of significant increases, that item appears on the list for a number of reasons. One, for the last 2 years, that program has been ESSER supported, and the $90,000 is new to the budget this year because that program has been ESSER supported. It is a summer program that is not mandated. It's not part of our required offerings, and it has supported between 80 and 100 students, which is a relatively small impact in the summer when you compare it to some of the other conversations we're going to have tonight that look at other things that happened during the school year. So that is probably the biggest surprise that is on the list for your consideration tonight. We know that it has been well received by those 80 to 100 families that have participated. We've presented it to you each September that we've returned and told you what a positive experience it has been. But considering that the ESSER grants are sunsetting, that it's new money, that it's a non-required summer program, we felt we had to put it on the list compared to some of the other big decisions we're making between September and June.
Dr. Freeman, where in the budget is it called out specifically? The 90,000.
Where does the 90,000 live for Pathways?
It's in a salary line within the teacher's salary budget.
So it's worked into the teacher's salaries?
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, I appreciate the question, Moira.
Yeah.
The other component that is becoming more obvious is that it's becoming more of a challenge to staff the program. Teachers in this new environment are less interested in summer opportunities and more interested in recharging their batteries. And so we've struggled this last year specifically to fill all of the teacher positions that were associated with the program.
Where would that leave us? Oh, I'm sorry, did I?
It's okay, no, I
just
raised my
jumped.
hand as you
Go
talked.
ahead, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, please.
Just to clarify, because I've already seen people talking about this fabulous program on Facebook. So does that mean that this summer it would terminate or next summer? Because technically this is the 20.
This
it would be
summer?
This summer?
Yeah, this budget ends in
because that
June,
budget
on
goes-
June.
Yes,
in
yeah, it's
June.
usually one of
One
the
more
early
in.
expenditures. It's one of the early expenditures of the upcoming budget, right?
But to your point, I think we've heard some pretty positive
We
feedback
have.
about this program.
Very-
And
very
it's
much
all over
so.
Facebook already because parents are starting to plan for summer and there's already people that are building this into their summer plans and and I've only heard phenomenal things about it. I get the teacher shortage part of it, but that does just give me some concern for at least this year. Maybe it's something to consider for the following year and put people on notice of that, but
Again, we're not excited about any of these.
no, I know,
Yep.
I know.
We felt that we needed to put it out for your consideration.
Where would that leave us with any summer programs?
So we still offer extended school year for any student who requires an additional summer extension. I think Dr. Goss has spoken, if not at these meetings, at least at the CIAs, that we are looking to still provide a high-quality teaching institute this summer that would be based on professional development for teachers rather than asking them to come in and deliver teaching. There would be a small number of students involved in that activity, but I mean a small number of students. We'd be talking probably in the area of 20 and possibly 40 if we ran it at two different grade levels. So it wouldn't be impacting the 80 to 100 families in the way that Pathways impacted those families.
Okay.
One was not considered a replacement for the other, but again, as we looked harder at places that we could make reductions, we felt like we needed to bring this one up, at least for your consideration, without enthusiasm.
No,
Let's see, I'm not seeing it here. So I'm just trying to find it.
Dr. Balistrisi?
Yeah.
If you don't mind if I could just start?
Absolutely.
I want to talk about medical, so maybe Linda, you might be able to kind of point me in the right direction. I'm just wondering, I don't see that line item here of reductions, and I'm just wondering if there was ever any conversation around that, specifically because we are still looking at a fund balance that is significant, and I just wonder if we're getting to a point where we're putting too much into that fund balance. You know, it is now up to $6 million. And I know that money needs to be there. I just wonder if we're looking to make cuts, right? Maybe that could be a potential area that we should look at.
It's always a potential area. We checked with our insurance consultant last week because with every passing month, we want to know, are there new numbers and does this look better? At this point, we budgeted the $800,000 that is already netted into this budget. We did that in the early first draft. We did that with guidance from the insurance consultant in collaboration with town. We checked with Joe Spurgeon last week, and at this point, he's not comfortable offering more. At times, we have pushed, and we've gone in even a little bit lower than he was comfortable recommending. And we can still hope that as your budget moves forward to the Board of Finance, and if we have to come back and have more conversations, we'll call and check on those numbers again from Joe. But at this moment in time, it may be a little conservative, but we're holding. We could certainly, you see a lot of blank lines on this worksheet. If the board was inclined to move in that direction, we could certainly talk about that, and you're accepting a liability, but it's backstopped by the fund balance.
Yeah.
I'm still a little gun shy because I remember when we were running $700,000 in the red and how hard we worked to build up that fund balance. So it's not here tonight, doesn't mean that it can't be here tonight or can't be here in future conversations.
Good to know.
I don't think we'd be looking at something like $250,000. We'd be talking
Yep.
another 50,
Yep.
right, something in that range that
Right.
we would take.
Sorry, I know I have a lot of questions tonight, sorry.
We all do.
You added site improvements here. I know that every year when we talk about this, you always do that, and yet every year we come in over budget for site improvements. So my question to you is kind of what, I don't want to keep doing that. It's the same with that, it's the same with legal, it's the same, sometimes it's that way with tuition, although we're pretty good with tuition.
Yep.
I really
I
don't
think I
want
know
to.
what this is, though.
Oh,
Yeah, site,
Is it the 595
yes. So
project? Yeah.
site improvements carries a very specific 90,000 and not 100,000. And there's a rather lengthy explanation because I'm still not confident about this one for everything that you were beginning to say. I apologize for pointing, I'm getting excited.
it's okay.
So site improvements, when we provided it to you in the budget book, included a projected itemized list. One of the items on the itemized list was $90,000 for 595 because the bids are coming, well, we've already had the bids, but because we've delayed the start of this project, costs are increasing. So we thought that we could defray some of the cost increases with 90,000 out of the site improvement line. Since that time, we have had a positive response from bond counsel who has identified some unexpended bonds in town that would be appropriate for the 595 project. Having identified both of those pools, we now think that it is reasonable to go back to site improvements and reduce the 90,000 that is earmarked for 595. Having said that, I really would prefer not to provide itemized lists because they're only projections, and if you think of it as a pool of money that is more fluid, which in reality it is, and is targeted towards preventative maintenance, then we really want to be building up to a target of 1% of the annual budget. The line as it sits in front of you is not at 1%, and if we reduce it by 90,000, it will be that much less closer to 1%. But because of the positive response from bond counsel and recognizing that this is the third year floating around 4.5 to 5.5, we think that site improvement would be a reasonable place to make that reduction this year. Next year, we may try to come forward with site improvement that doesn't have an itemized list, but has a list of areas that we target that spending towards.
Well, you did a great job.
Thank you very much.
I get all that, and it always worries me every year in
Yes.
operations when we're always over budget, and then we're trying to move things around at the end of the school year to make everything line up, so.
Yep.
Thank you for that explanation.
And particularly in the 22-23 year, we went over significantly, but per your point, it has been a line. And Dr. Freeman, to your point, and I think we've mentioned his name before, a previous colleague, John Ireland on this board, regularly encouraged us to
move
make
up to that,
sure
yeah.
that we were at a 1%, because it was just a much more responsible way to try to do that kind of preventive work.
And while we were getting closer, we've been pulling back in these last 2 and now 3 cycles because of the overall size of the increase each year.
So at least what I'm hearing is that on the list that we have in the proposed budget, there is an accommodation for the renovations to 595 future use in the bonding.
Yes.
Our decision then would be whether we would then consider cutting the 90,000 associated
If all.
with that on this list,
If
or
and
whether,
yeah.
right, or whether we recognize the need to have a decent amount of money
A buffer,
in a fund like this, because our facilities director and his staff are constantly trying to make sure that our buildings are in good shape for our
And
students.
if you desired, we could easily create an updated projected list of itemized expenses. Mr. Gurnham would have no problem taking that item out and finding other ways to invest those dollars in upkeep and preventative maintenance.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm then noticing several positions on this list. I think some of these are in the area of positions that we've been talking about for the last several weeks on the board. So there's a consideration around safety monitors, there's a consideration around the drama teacher for Adams Middle School, there is a consideration for the full-time equivalent classroom teacher at LEAT. You also have here a possibility of 2.5 FTE para positions. Again, as Mr. Delventura noted, each caucus, party-specific caucus has had time to talk, although we have, as we are allowed to do, and had some sharing in those smaller groups. But some of this certainly overlaps with at least what some of us were talking about in the caucus.
Part of that conversation is going to be on LEAT, and I do think this might be an opportunity to have a discussion around open choice at LEAT, because we have seen some written correspondence from parents in terms of whether or not LEAT will be receiving open choice students. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So again, the original base draft included, in fact, an increase of a position at LEAT. It would have moved from 14 sections total to 15 sections total. Currently, the fourth grade at LEAT has only 2 sections. We have no plan to take the 3 sections in third grade and collapse them into 2 sections in fourth grade. So that original plan had us building out 1 additional position. We were anticipating in that case that with first grade having the lowest class size in LEAT, that is where we would offer open choice seats, and in fact began conversations with some of the staff in LEAT around that eventuality. The last several weeks have had us talking about those class sizes, and in fact it looks now like the reduction in first grade moving to kindergarten at LEAT is at least going to be seriously considered. And we needed to inform ACES of where the positions would be. I think the deadline for that information was last week. We worked with ACES and tried to figure out if we could simply say first grade district-wide, but they require school names. The parents are offered those seats with school names attached to them. So at this point, we have informed ACES that it appears the seats would be available at both Jones and at Lakes. Those first grade classrooms will be sitting, as they are at this time, around 15s and 16s, regardless of any decision that is made that impacts first grade at either LEAT or Cox. That was the clearest and safest way to report that to ACES. We also know that once a decision is made, we may reach out and try to have that conversation again if the decision ends up going in a different way, but we needed to meet the deadline, needed to give them that information, and regardless, the plan moving forward is that we will have choice students in all grades and at all schools. And so while we may have gotten out one meeting ahead with the LEAT staff, we'll be able to catch up and recoup that with the Jones and the Lake staff. And LEAT, if they don't have choice students this year, will certainly have choice students in coming years. And so it has not been any wasted effort on their part.
In particular to that kindergarten class right now, I mean, if you were to just look at the numbers, that would make the most sense to bring in open choice students. Just looking at the numbers alone of the class sizes. Now that the decision's been made with ACES, are we past the point of reconsidering that?
We think we may be.
Okay.
But again, if the decision was made to restructure those 3 classes into 2, then it would not have
Correct.
made sense, right? Choice has to be based on our open seats.
Mm-hmm.
We will have open seats in Lakes and Jones, regardless of that decision. We may not at LEAT, and so we weren't going to
That's fair.
make an open choice decision that then would in any way influence the decision that you might make about that class size at LEAT.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. That was perfect.
Is there anything else on this list? I think the last thing we're noticing is a potential suggestion of ice time in athletics. Is there any interest in the board in considering a cut to any of the athletic entries in the budget at the moment? And do you wanna say something?
That would be a reduction of new monies. So this
Right.
budget includes an
sorry.
additional $25,000 that will essentially bring us to full funding of ice time. If we reduced by 15, it would be another contribution of 10,000, getting us closer to full funding, but not closing the full gap. I also for tonight's conversation didn't include other new monies in athletics, but specifically there were a number of new coaching positions, including a head coaching position for 2 seasons of cheer. Those are all areas that could be considered as well. I didn't even want to put those on the list tonight, but obviously those could be open for consideration. Dr. Balistraci, I would also just like to note that the para reduction, when we suggest reducing the number of paraprofessionals, that is a budget suggestion that will carry liabilities with it, just as reducing tuition would be. So to be completely honest, we have a projection for paras that we anticipate needing next year. We could be off, we could have over-projected, and so we could make this reduction of 2.5 or 2 or 3. I want to be really clear that when paras are identified as necessary through the PPT process, we will fill those positions. And so even if we reduce this line, there's simply a greater possibility that we might come in over the line without making a reduction if the needs are there. If we reduce it, we will not stop filling para positions if they're identified as needed. We may end up running over in that line. But that happens when you make reductions to the tuition line. We just talked about how that could happen with site improvements. I just wanted to be really clear because it's FTEs.
Yeah, no, thank you.
That's the position we would need to take.
And I know that the last couple of years, we received more from the state in excess cost, but we're not anticipating that high of a reimbursement rate going forward, correct?
Well, we don't know, yeah.
We don't know, but.
The preliminary
The
news this year,
conversation.
preliminary news this year is that we will track closer to our projection, if not, for the first time in years, a little below projection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something?
No, I just was gonna add that we won't really know that till the governor puts out his proposed budget, and then it could be months before that settles
Oh,
out.
as this budget will be impacted, yes. I was
Yes.
I was talking about this current year.
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
you're
yeah,
exactly
moving
The
right.
state budget, but in
Yep.
terms of the ECS funding, if it did get shifted away,
Yes.
we wouldn't know that in time to. Right.
No,
It's
but
important to
it's-
think about,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, so, thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Well, we were discussing in our caucus meeting the HVAC person for $90,000, thinking that even though it makes good sense, and if we have to cut the budget, that would be an obvious one. But the note we got today is that that $90,000 has already been deducted from the
Correct.
service line, so that if we took it out, we'd have to put it back in the other side.
Or risk being very under budgeted on an HVAC service line, correct?
Yeah, that's a helpful clarification.
I did, we did have a very healthy conversation about this position, because that was, it was around that concept, but then also the thought was, do we have anybody in-house that we could train to be HVAC certified? I mean, is this a position that we would want
Probably an
to
apprenticeship.
bring somebody up from within?
It would take years to
It's-
train
Okay.
somebody.
Yeah,
It's a lot
Yeah,
of,
they have to.
there's-
Thank you. I didn't know that.
Ultimately, yes, but it would
Yes.
take a long time, yes.
I was about to punt, but
And
thank you.
You need someone who knows what they're doing to train the person, so it's,
Well, they have to get licensed.
yeah,
Yeah, they have
Got
to.
it.
It's a 3 to 5 year licensing process.
That answers that then.
This is what is really helpful about having a range of expertise.
On the board, that's exactly
Board
right.
of Education.
Can I ask about the drama teacher at Adams and just have a conversation about that and just understand, is it filling a void or is this adding an additional, I think it'd be helpful for folks to just hear the logic behind that and-
Yep.
and why recommending maybe not doing it this year.
So this position very much needs to be described as an enhancement. This is a way to do the things we're doing better and try to serve the students at Adams and help prepare them for the high school experience better than we're currently providing for them now. It's not filling a hole or fixing a problem. Right now, at Adams, specials happen most similarly to the way specials happen at Baldwin and at the elementary schools. There are core classes that are addressed in team, math, science, English language arts, and social studies, and then there are specials experience that students experience through the course of the year, and all students generally have the same experiences. Dr. Mullen was looking at her schedule and recognizing, the board may recall that a couple of years ago, we looked at reducing music staffing at Adams, and in fact, held on to staffing that we thought was, that provided a little capacity, more than was necessary to provide that kind of program. Year or two before that, we added a second technology teacher. Dr. Mullen was looking at this and thinking that with the addition of one more specials teacher, drama in this case, we could shift from a specials design to an elective design, like the students experience at the high school, so that we would be able to be offering tech ed courses and music courses and drama courses and language courses, and the students could make choices and sign up for them more in a high school model than in an elementary model. That's not to say that the way we're doing it this year won't continue to work next year, and not to say, and we know that sometimes the most creative ideas need to come before the board 2 or 3 times before they fit into a budget. So we're excited about it. I know that Dr. Mullen was excited to explain it to you. I think in the Adams Chorus Room was the night that we were talking about it. But it has to be defined as an enhancement to what's currently happening, not something that we need to meet class size, to meet growing enrollment, or to fix a problem.
Okay, thank you.
And Dr. Mullen is here. I don't know if would you like to, okay, I'm getting a thumbs up.
Is the intention, I'm just thinking if it's something we could, I'm not saying we are, but if we couldn't do it this year, is it something we could build towards this year? Like in just looking at current staff and seeing if there may be a way to offer
We spoke
in
earlier.
some capacity within the music or arts department? I don't know. Yeah.
We spoke earlier, and we're both committed to bringing this back to you next year if it didn't make it through this year's budget cycle. We haven't pushed to see if we could make that model work at current staffing levels.
Yeah.
I'm a little hesitant to try to pull that off again.
I'm not putting you on the spot about that. I'm just
So-
saying it's a wonderful idea. It's just if it didn't come to fruition this year, what could we be doing this year to kind of work towards that, I guess?
I think continuing the planning and the building for it, and maybe talk more about it between now and next budget cycle. But I don't know that it's something, I mean, at times we have been able to say to you, we can still do it and we'll do it with current staffing. This one
is
doesn't
different.
feel that way to me, but it doesn't mean that we won't continue a PR campaign before it returns next year.
Okay, thanks.
If we keep it in, what is the likelihood that we will be able to find a teacher?
I think high, because the reality is that we could do it with a teacher who is English Language Arts certified with a passion for drama. It is not necessarily a standalone certification, if I'm correct, or we could certainly do it with somebody who's English Language Arts certified but knows what we're looking for them to know. So I think high.
What's the, explain the LEAT, classroom LEAT line here? What's the thinking there?
That is the thinking that the current kindergartens at LEAT, which are sitting at 13, 13, and 13, could be collapsed into 2 first grade sections next year of 19 and 20.
And again, that fixes your 4th grade problem.
4th grade problem is still addressed, yes, right. You don't need to add a position to cover the 4th grade sections. It's the one that is reduced from 1st grade that, and sometimes that's not a simple reassignment. That's not to say a teacher who's been teaching 1st grade moves. Principals make that decision, and sometimes it's 2 moves or 3 moves to make that work. But principals do that every year when you have the unaligned bubbles moving through.
Right,
Teachers
and just
have,
for those watching, like, a teacher certified for K is certified for 4th.
Correct.
Or first, a second, just to
Yep.
make sure people
the
understand that.
certification is the same, and Mr. Seal would make sure that he put the most appropriate people at the most appropriate sections. And at times, that even requires moves across schools. Teachers work for the system, not for one individual building. So we'd make sure that we covered it appropriately.
And that would keep us well within the range that we've outlined in policy and actually get us more into range, considering we are out of range right now.
It keeps the 4th grade in range, right, even though right, without pushing up against the upper limit, and that 1st grade, it's comfortably within the range. The bottom level, the bottom rung for 1st grade in your policy is 16. To continue 13s is falling further below that bottom, and the upper range for 1st and 2nd grades is 22. And so 2 classes of 19 and 20 actually has room for 5 more students to move into that grade in that school before we're pushing the upper limit on that class the way we are in some other sections and some other grades. And again, I just have to say, the average class size, K to 4 right now, is 17.1. That has to be one of the lowest average class sizes in the state. And the published ranges of 15 to 24 at the upper levels, spread across grade levels, are really manageable and reasonable and comfortable class sizes. Many Connecticut school districts would be jealous to be able to say that as we sit here today, the single largest class in our elementary level is 22. That's a really positive statement. And so I know that people are really engaged and thoughtful about this conversation, but I can't make clear enough that the published policy ranges that this board endorses are really positive and manageable class sizes to have in our schools.
So I don't want to cut off questions, and we can continue to ask questions. But we've done some discussions, obviously, over the last few board meetings. People have individually been diving into their books. We're starting to touch on some of the topics that I know have been considerations for us. So do we want to start talking about some of the details here? Around, I know we had some discussions around the Calvin Leet teacher, we had discussions around Dharma teacher, we had discussions around safety monitors. Others may have other things they want to talk about, but I'm suggesting we start somewhere. And I'm happy to volunteer a place to start unless someone wants to start somewhere specifically. Okay, we're talking about class size, or the full-time teacher. So one of the things that is a proposed addition to the budget is listed in the budget as a 4th grade teacher at Calvin Leet. And we do note that there are 3 3rd grades in Calvin Leet. There are only 2 4th grade teachers, and I think we have discussed not collapsing those because it would create 2 4th grades at 24, and that immediately butts against our upper recommendation. We've just heard Dr. Freeman talk about, we've talked again about a kindergarten at 13, 13, and 13 right now at Leet, and the idea of moving those 3 classes into 2 classes at grade 1, which would be classes of 20 and 19, again, below the upper limit of 22. So one possibility is to remove from the proposed budget this additional teacher at Calvin Leet, and recommend that the approach then taken by the administration is to continue to plan for an additional 4th grade teacher, but then plan for 1 fewer 1st grade teacher at that school.
Correct.
So I'm suggesting a conversation around that topic.
I'll just remind the board that we have collapsed classes in the past.
Absolutely.
Recently, and as at A.W. Cox just a couple of years ago during the pandemic. So I think it's the easiest, I'm sorry. I know it's the easiest numbers wise. When you take out the human element of it, it's the thing that makes the most sense. So I would definitely.
In fact, Mrs. Baldwin, the policy is written in such a way to suggest that we should be doing this
Right.
each, right? That it should happen between K and 1, and it should happen again between 2 and 3. Otherwise, the scaled sizes in the policy are meaningless.
Yeah, we
And so-
can't sustain this district-wide.
Correct.
Right.
Right. There's, I think there are a couple of concerns, some of them named here. Sustaining this district-wide is not possible. We've had some, certainly parent input and concerns about equity. We know every year that there is variation per grade across schools in elementary because we have 4 elementary schools, and it is simply impossible to ensure all 4. What we do try to ensure is that these classes stay within proposed limits.
And this change reduces the variation that we
And that is
saw at
exactly
kindergarten
right.
this year?
This,
Yes.
this proposal really does reduce that variation. Other thoughts on this?
I mean, I would also like to remind everyone that we did offer parents at Cox the opportunity to enroll their student at LEAT last year to try to alleviate some of this. And I don't think did we have one taker?
We had very limited interest, and so while it was a wildly creative idea, it was a wholly ineffective idea.
Sure, but
Yep.
it was still an attempt, you know,
Yes.
that it was a good idea, it was worth trying. So I think that's partly how we wound up kind of continuing at this 13, 13, and 13, which is far
Right.
lower than our recommendations.
Are there concerns, anyone who has concerns about this? I think what we can do is write down our ideas here and then vote at the end.
Yeah.
But as we're discussing this particular issue, does anybody have concerns, more discussion, thoughts on this proposal?
Be comfortable leaving it in the reduction line.
Likewise.
Okay, so, so at the moment, under proposed reductions, we have the pension of 21,000, which was noted at the beginning as, and then the elementary school teacher at Calvin Leet, which is in the budget at a $65,000 expense, so that would be a further reduction for consideration.
And just to note, that was a proposed new position that we are taking out, and so this does not cost a job, this
Right.
doesn't lay off a real
Right.
person, and we're working with a budget number of 65,000 because it is a new position that is simply not going to be new next year.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And I just, this is like totally an aside, but I picked up the newspaper on Sunday, the New Haven Register, and the main headline was schools bracing for massive cuts and layoffs. So I do want to just say, I commend this district, and I commend you, Dr. Freeman, and all of these people who work so hard on our budget, because the main focus of the article was ESSER funds that were ending, and schools had not prepared for that and had not built that into the budget. You guys have done the most amazing job. When I read that article, I get chills, because I'm like, you guys anticipated that, built it in, and we're talking about one staff
Thank
member
you.
versus 20, or social workers or psychologists, or, so I'm very proud of this district, and I adore the board or the panel that puts this budget together every year, because you really were very thoughtful. I think that was the phrase you used a lot, Dr. Freeman. and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Other thoughts or suggestions?
The site improvement line, while we've recognized exactly where that 90,000 could move in bonding, I do feel like it's an opportunity to make a reduction, but maybe not a full $90,000 reduction. I'd like to earmark a $50,000 reduction, at least right now, and at least work that into the reduction line and see where that goes.
What other people think about that suggestion?
I want to understand the delay with 595 a little bit, that's getting us to this increase of 90,000. It's been like several years now, and I just feel it's a responsibility we should be explaining to, because yes, we're bonding, but it's still borrowing money, so I just want to understand, are we going to be saying this again in 6 months? Oh, the prices are more, and that we needed to buffer that more, you know, in terms of keeping the site improvement line higher. I just want to understand that better.
I think we're probably going to need Mr. Gurnham to help with that
Yeah.
answer, and we have already been talking about making 595 an agenda item for your next operations committee meeting. So,
Okay.
I mean, the quick answer is that since this is an office project, it has always been at the bottom of the priority list for all of the summer scheduling. We've moved school building projects ahead of it on multiple occasions. But I do think we should probably talk about this more globally at the next operations meeting when Mr. Gurnham is in attendance.
I guess is there confidence that that 90,000 in bonding will be adequate, or is that, we don't?
There's some confidence. I think we need to have further conversation, and I'm just not comfortable doing it without Mr.
Right,
Gurnham.
I'm just trying to think,
Yeah.
like, if we're allotting the 90 for bonding, but should we be creating a little bit more of a buffer on site improvements? God forbid it goes a little bit higher. And so to John's point, maybe it's 30,000, maybe it's 40,000, but I think, I don't want it just to be fun money. I want it to like have a not that anything we do is fun money, but I mean, just like, we can always find things that can be helpful to site improvement projects. I get that. I would love to see us at 1% every year. It's really hard when you're trying to do everything else that touches the students every day first.
We will be able
Yeah.
to spend those dollars well every single year, especially at the level that they're at now. I do think that the suggestion to take some of that and wait, because we may be back at this conversation if the Board of Finance reduces us
Yeah.
further. So if we were to reduce 45 now or 50 now, then yes, we might be back here taking another 40 or 45 if the Board of Finance reduces the bottom line further from whatever decision is made here tonight. So that seems completely logical to me, and I agree that we should talk more about 595 at a meeting where we can have Mr. Gurnham here to help us with that
Great,
conversation.
thank you.
What do other people think about this proposal?
I think there can be a reduction, I think a 50,000 reduction is maybe too much. Every year it's over budget.
Yeah.
Every year, and you just think about the emergencies with the asbestos this year, the pipe leaking, and the costs of those emergency fixes were very expensive. So I'm, like, a responsible homeowner, right? You want to have something there, making sure that you can afford those. So I don't know if maybe a $30,000 or $35,000 reduction at this point, or,
I just want to be clear, this would be actually an addition to the site improvement line.
Right.
Correct.
exactly.
Yeah, so
adding.
we're actually talking about an addition as
Right.
opposed to taking away from the site
I
improvement.
want
So-
to add more, take away less.
Well,
That makes
let's be clear about what you mean by that. What you're saying is that because the 90,000 is taken care of somewhere else.
From bonding. Yep.
Right.
The 90,000 that was in the budget for site improvements.
Could allow for more ceiling tiles or carpet than would have been planned for in the itemized list we gave.
Correct.
Okay,
So what
I
I'm-
just said,
what I'm
I want to make
advocating
sure
for-
that this is
Thank
explained
you,
so
yes.
everybody
It's
understands
as
what you
if we're
just said.
adding $90,000 to.
To the
because-
already
to the
said
already
line
site
item.
improvement line.
So this is contingency money,
Yes, right?
it's
So
contingency money.
it's
We're
adding-
adding contingency money.
it would be adding 90,000 available to the itemized list. It would be reducing the bottom line, right? So if we left it untouched, it adds 90,000 to the itemized list without changing the bottom line. If we take 595 out of the itemized list and cut it by 45, it's actually $45,000 more that we can itemize to spend while reducing the bottom line by
Right.
$45,000. I know that's convoluted, but yes,
Yeah, and every year, Mr. Gurnham comes in with us with, well, these projects can't get done because we ran out of money.
yes.
Right.
That's the other
Well,
piece.
well, and
Emergencies, all that
I
kind of
would,
stuff.
I would guess that behind this list here,
He's built in contingency around that.
no, what I was going to say was, behind this list here is a whole list of projects that didn't make this
it,
list
yeah.
this year.
Right.
I mean, it's not like
Capital.
this is all that needs to be done around here. So, again, I'm willing to consider what board members think. I would make it a smaller reduction. I just, that line has, it was over budget in like November this year,
Even sooner.
for this
I think it
year.
was even
So
sooner.
I think we should take care in reducing that too much.
And in fact, we keep throwing around this 1% number. The current proposed level for that line is $90,000 short of the 1% that we have been targeting for years and never really caught up to.
Interesting.
So why don't we reduce it by 30?
Yes, I think it's a third, yes, I think that makes sense.
I like that.
It's close enough to my 50.
Further,
Maybe we have it, we do 45.
we just heard 30 on this
Oh,
end, so there are
okay.
multiple conversations going on. That's
Yeah.
not to trump one or the other, I
No,
just
no,
want to make
yeah.
sure that it's a discussion. I would feel more comfortable with 30, honestly. I
Okay.
get very concerned about that line, and the fact that we were over in November
Yeah.
I'm with
means
you on 30.
that, for more than 6 months of the year, we know
Yes.
that
So we'd reduce by 30, but adding 60 in essence.
We've reduced the line item by
Correct.
$30,000, which will give us, since we're removing 595, the ability to do 60,000 more in itemized projects.
That's a good place to start.
We will
Okay.
redo the itemized list and adjust the bottom line.
And let's be clear, preventative maintenance costs a whole lot less money. than
100%.
It's good money to spend.
100%, absolutely. All right, I know there's been some discussion of safety monitors.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I know there was some discussion of reducing at least a few of the safety monitors that are in the budget, so I want to open that up for discussion.
I think what I'm most excited about in the budget is not necessarily the safety monitors, but the SRO. I think we have an amazing opportunity to really enrich the relationship with our students and our law enforcement in town. We've already seen how well it works with our SRO currently. I believe it's 2 additional SROs on top of the already one.
We're, in this budget year, we're at 2, although we have only been able to staff 1, and then next year we will be at 3. So the budget will be in place for 3 positions, and we will hope to be able to fill at least 2, if not all 3 of those positions.
I mean, we've talked about this. Obviously, this was, to your point, with ESSER funds being involved in a lot of difficult decisions. When we caucused, we did identify this because it's a big line item. I do see a use for this, the safety monitors, especially at our middle schools. You know, my thought is that, especially with the addition of the SROs, a reduction in the safety monitors can be had, in my opinion, at the elementary level.
I agree. I think the safety monitors are very nice to have. I don't think there's any data behind it showing that we need them. And again, I would, if I could, I would give on every level to our students, but I think we do have to make difficult decisions, and I think the safety monitors are a very good place to start.
I don't disagree with that position. The only thing I would ask is that if there is a reduction of FTEs to this line, that you know, the administration talk with the principals and talk about how best to deploy those. In some ways, there can be an argument that they're most beneficial at the elementary where there are fewer adult eyes in a supervisory fashion. Again, these are not security, but they are supervisory, and so I totally understand, and if there needs to be a reduction, I just want to ask that we have the ability to meet with the principals and talk about how best to deploy the FTEs that are left in this line.
To your point, if this was security, this would be a very different conversation.
Right.
We are
Absolutely.
not talking about security.
These are in no way
No,
security positions.
I'll just read, because this is one of the responses to the question around it. It says, "They are not and have never been intended to be a security force. They are not trained as security. They monitor student behavior in halls, et cetera. In the past, they've been referred to as hall monitors." So I know that the response was a little bit bigger, but
Yes.
I think, to your point, John, is that the SROs really are the ones that create that and provide that actual security, should anything come into play. But,
And this is a $250,000 line that has
Yeah.
not been the board's responsibility, right? The safety monitors who exist today are being paid for with ARPA funds through the town. So we totally recognize that.
Well,
And I think that, given what their roles are, I think that you can get a little creative here. My thought was, and I've been talking to various people, is maybe you do some extra training, you know, and maybe you pay like a lunch or recess aid, where they come in for pickup and drop off, when there's a lot more, and again, I use that phrase fluidity, when there's a lot more people around where you need the extra eyes, for a lot less money, you can do something like, you may be able to do something like that, where you have a couple of extra people come in for those limited time periods. But again, for a lot less money, but yet getting the same result that with eyes.
I think that's why we would defer to you, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you're asking, because
Yeah.
you've always come up with some really creative and really brilliant solutions in the past, and so I don't think we should be the ones telling you how to determine that. I hope,
I agree.
and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I
Yeah.
think that that's
No,
the
and we will certainly
intention.
work in that direction.
Yeah.
Again, I just want to note that those split positions get harder and harder to fill. So while we're still struggling for recess aides, we filled these positions pretty quickly. And none of that is to argue that the board should not be making a reduction in this line. It's just to, as we think of those creative solutions, we're going to be thinking in a different environment than we had in the past. But whatever FTE is left in this line, whether it's the 2 we currently have at the high school or whether there's some increase, we will deploy them in the most creative and the most effective way that we can, and we will include the whole leadership team in those decisions.
Well, I'm hearing at least a
Partial reduction.
proposal of a reduction of 4.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Are there others who want to?
Well, we've had safety monitors for 1 year with ESSER funds, right?
Correct.
ARPA
ARPA funds,
ARPA
correct,
funds.
yes.
And by putting any safety monitor, by putting any of the, like putting 6 in, I mean, we had 2, so I'm not talking about the 2 that are already there. By putting any in, we're essentially saying it's important enough to put this concept into our budget, which means for the future. So we're going to be faced next year starting off with a high budget anyway, because we got contractual obligations by inflation. So if we didn't put any of this in this year, okay, we ought to do it and say, we just don't think this is as high a priority as other things we've got to do. By putting anything in there, we're saying, well, we're not going to do it all this year, but our goal over time would be to do more safety monitors. And so the question is, it's worth having that conversation now and saying, is safety monitors high on our priority list with regard to classroom teachers or SROs or anything else? Or is this a time when we say, we're just not going to do it for the moment? And if it comes back next year because the 1 year experience we've had shows up as a terrible thing by not having them, I just don't want to get us into a situation where we might decide to have to cut whatever we put in this year because we've deferred the concept about whether we think it's important or not. So the question is, John has made the case that the SROs are important.
Yeah, we're certainly not
Okay.
discussing that.
Not discussing that.
Yeah.
So if we're going to go 4, should we go all of them? I'm raising that question, I'm not recommending.
Well, Dr. Freeman, there was a little salary difference with some of the positions, like not by much, but by like $3,000 or $4,000. Is there something we should be considering in that, in terms of like, if we were to reduce by 4, like, do we base it on the lower salary?
I
Like,
think we'd be
or do
looking
you
at a
just wanna
dollar
tell-
amount, and you
Yeah.
would determine
Right.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to
so
figure out.
what I
So if we
have here,
said split it in half, 125, you would,
Well-
Correct.
you would in essence,
But that's
We might
What-
come back and say that we wanted to repackage and post the positions at a different dollar amount.
Right.
We might, yes.
so when we discussed the 4, I mean, what I kind of in preparation for tonight, just so I had some things that we might possibly be discussing, identified 147,577, which is the equivalent of the 4 safety monitors, again, at the elementary school with a decision to say to the administration, we're taking 4 out. At this point, I think we're talking about the difference of 5 or 6,000. No, I'm saying between a 38, I'm sorry, we're talking 2 different things. I'm saying a per safety monitor amount, if we just take the 4 bottom out, and decide to reduce this by 4 safety monitors, we are reducing the proposed budget by $147,577. Okay.
I would suggest if you were to make that reduction $145,000, then we would look at the 2 positions that were legacy positions at the high school.
Totally.
Look at the dollar amounts that were left, maybe consider, can we do part-time assignments? Can we repackage those?
I have no problem
And
with
do
that.
what we could in the direction of that priority with the monies that were left.
I have no problem with that. So there is a discussion then about reducing by 4
At 145,000.
at 145,000.
So,
So it's actually a reduction of 105,000.
No, it's a reduction of 145.
That's what I
No,
heard.
instead of 250,000.
That's for 6. The 2 already
Right.
exist. They're not, the 2 have been in our budget for years at the high school.
So you're saying, oh,
They're
I see
not
what you're
included in the figure
They're
you
not.
see in
Yeah.
front
So
of you
the
tonight.
total budget that we're gonna have for these monitors is 145,000.
It's actually 105.
No.
That's what I said,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
If we're reducing
What I'm
145,
talking
that
about
means
is what we're
105.
reduction. We are
Right.
reducing 145,000.
leaving a balance of $105,000 for us to figure out how to deploy. And I will make that at this time, this number stands apart from the 2 legacy positions that we're currently at the high
Right.
school. So there are 2 FTEs at the high school, plus $145,000 to
Okay.
provide
Yeah.
this kind of layered monitoring, supervision. We'll figure out what to do with that and report back to the board on how we intend to use those funds.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Can we pause and take a quick
Yeah, let's
look at that number?
Yes, so we have 4 safety monitors at 145K. We have a FTE elementary teacher at LEAT for 65. We have a pension reduction at 21. And we have site improvement reduction at 30. Which is 261K,
Yeah.
which if we're also interested in this, and I'm quite sure my partner in crime over there, Linda, is going to correct me or,
Beat you to it, Louis?
no, or beat me to She's most definitely gonna beat me to it, my friend, because clearly it's taking me a while here.
I'm trying to figure out the percentage.
I am
Yeah.
figuring out the percentage, but Mrs. Trudeau is being really polite and waiting for me instead of just blurting it out, because I'm quite sure she's already gotten it. And I just blew that. Linda, what do we got here?
5.08.
Okay,
By reducing those things, we get down to 508?
Yes.
Yeah,
Now,
so
I'm-
261,000, that's pretty close to
50.
0.5%. That feels like that's 0.4% for just
I was going to
261,000.
say, it doesn't make sense to me.
okay. Oh,
Am I
no, no,
missing
no,
something?
no, I think that makes perfect sense.
Does it? Okay.
Oh, it sure does.
210,
Yep.
So
It's
720,000 would be a full
5.0,
percent.
it's 5.008%. Yep.
Okay.
Chest Linda.
We were at, before the pension and the site improvements, with just the first 2, we were at 5.15. So the additional 51,000 brought it down to 5.08. Is there anything else that we want to discuss here?
I don't think any of us are looking to take summer pathways away, although that was
No.
a recommendation, so I think unless anyone else wants to talk
I-
about that.
I
yeah,
would-
I don't think that's,
I've just
I
heard
would-
such
we didn't
fabulous.
caucus, yeah, and that wasn't really in our.
One of the highlights of the first meetings
Yeah.
back from summer. I
Yeah.
mean, it really,
Yeah.
it really is. And I think that, unless we really have a staffing issue in which it
Right.
really negates it being a successful, summer pathway, I'd rather keep it in and
Yeah.
have that experience, even if it's only 80 children. I mean, it
Well-
makes a significant impact in summer.
If staffing becomes the deciding factor, then we may end up limiting the size, but we would not shut it down completely. If we can only get X teachers, then we would offer X number, X times those number of seats.
And that
so-
would in turn reduce the budget needed to,
Yes.
Yeah.
Which would also then end up costing less moving forward
Right.
if we had to limit it because of availability. We have advertised outside of Guilford for those positions. We prefer Guilford teachers, but if necessary, we advertise out. And again, not looking forward to this, but if we have to have this conversation again following a Board of Finance meeting, then we can talk further about that as well as any other item on this list or any partial item that's been left on this list tonight. I hope that doesn't happen, but our experience has been that at times happens.
if in fact, last year at this time, we were talking about how big a summer program could we create in the future years, because it was so enriching. So rather than worrying about safety monitors as a principle, here we've already agreed that this is really a great educational opportunity, and if we can enrich it and expand it, all things considered, that would be something we want to do over the next 5 years.
And I just want to remind everybody in the viewing audience too about the salary increase that makes up most of this budget increase. I think we talked about it before we went into the meeting, but I want to say it's like a 3.5 or 3.8% increase. That's really the driver here in this 5% increase.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, when we made the initial presentation, it was important to, I think it remains important to note that of the original 5.4% increase, which is now down significantly, about 1% of that was connected to ideas like a drama teacher or expanding classroom positions or embedding into the budget the last 2 or 3 ESSER positions that we had not taken on. Most of that increase is due to what we would identify as non-discretionary increases. Costs of doing business through inflation, contractual increases that are obligated not just to the teachers, but to all of our bargaining units. That's exactly right. Most of this budget increase is because of the environment that we are in, not because of enhancements that we were excited about bringing forward.
And then the other thing, just in terms of sharing information about what we need to consider every year, is that approximately 60% of our budget is salaries.
Yep.
Contractual salaries. About 20% of the budget is benefits associated, so that everything else is in a 20%. And that's not fluff, right? That is everything from school supplies to transportation to heat to water to
Textbooks.
tuition to textbooks, right?
Yep.
But those numbers, it's always good, thank you, to remind people kind of the context within which these decisions are being made.
And just to say, like, yes, we had our teacher contract negotiation, and that I feel was very deserved, and it was really thought through well, and across the state that has happened, and I think it's a good thing, but yeah, it's an impact to districts that, you know, so I think we're in a real, to Jen's point, we're in such a good position comparative to largely many districts across the state right now because of the smart planning around ESSER funds going away and teacher contracts being renegotiated.
That's right.
There are a lot of districts that are at 8, 9, one is at 20%.
Yeah, the numbers coming in some of these districts
Yes.
are 6 and 7 and 8.
Yes, exactly. That's the
And
norm.
like you said, 1 at 20, which is breathtaking.
So,
Are there other things that the board wants to consider tonight?
I just want to understand, so if we're at the original, just again for the audience, our original budget number was 5.47%, correct? And
4.46, yep.
5.46, thank you. And so the reductions we just discussed get us down to 5.08. So it's almost a 0.4% reduction. Okay, I just like want to put that in context to kind of, all right. And for every percentage, and Linda, you're our mathematician, in terms of this budget, every percentage point is equal to at how much in terms of spending?
700,000.
A 1%,
Yeah,
like a
just
full,
1%
a 1%
increments.
is 724.
$720,000.
Yeah, right, okay, just again, put it in context for the overall budget, yeah.
We talked a little bit about positions that were added through ESSER funds and ARPA funds. One of those was the health aide. Can we speak to exactly what that position does? Because, you know, again, to Jen's point, there's a lot of districts that are faced with major cuts because of those fundings that now have sunsetted. So can we explain exactly that, you know, how that position was brought in, why that position was brought in? Was it brought in because of post-pandemic issues or during pandemic issues?
I need to refer Jason to you and Linda to answer that.
Yeah, it came in through the monies received, both through the town initially, I believe, right, Linda?
Oh, yeah.
Through the town, and then during COVID. When I discussed this position with Director Riley, Joanne Riley, she is adamant about how this individual helps the nurses throughout the district in a variety of different ways and allows them to attend to things more directly with children while the health aide does a lot of the administrative work. throughout. It was something that, again, was questionable in terms of monies last year. The town said, absolutely, we can cover it. And it was one of the decision packages that was put forward by Mrs. Riley to incorporate this person full-time in the district as our expense.
She really picks up some of the lower level needs at the schools, allowing the nurse to be looking at the more significant concerns and monitoring medication distribution, all the parental communications, all those pieces.
You know, does the vision screenings, you know, a whole variety of different.
Yeah, I mean, when you speak about, you know, how she feels it's adamant, that lays a context on it that helps. I mean, it's, you know, you look at, you know, when we look at these positions that were brought in by outside funds, you know, they become conversations, you know, but when you put it in context like that, that helps. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Where are folks, there's been some discussion about the drama teacher. What are people feeling about that right now?
I think we're where we wanted to be, and leave it in for now.
Okay. What do other people think?
I think it's a great addition to the curriculum, particularly because it also is a feeder to the spectacular theater program we've got at the high school. But giving kids choice at that point, particularly this kind, if we can afford it, makes sense. This is not frivolous at all. It's nice to have kids have that option.
Okay.
It's more art in the community, and that's something that we've consistently heard from this community, is they want more art.
Okay.
And I would say that I want to leave the paras in,
Yes.
Sure.
for sure.
I have,
Agreed.
yeah. Okay. Anything else? I will say that each of us in our various ways, mine is with lots and lots of stickies, or Post-its, sorry, Post-its and highlighter and ink all over the place, have really gone through this budget line by line, have asked a whole host of questions at the level of a line on page 47 or a line on page 73. And again, echo thanks to Mrs. Trudeau and her staff and Dr. Freeman and others in responding to all those questions. For the third year in a row, we have a higher increase than we're used to. But we are experiencing what people across the state and across the country are experiencing, whether they're a school district considering their budget or whether they are considering spending in other ways. This budget is impacted by, as Mrs. Rader noted, the very important increases in teacher salaries. It is impacted by inflation, supply chain issues. The cost of doing business has changed. And we are actually considering right here, at this point, a lower increase than a lot of our neighboring communities, and some of that, I'll echo Mrs. Baldwin, is 100% about the very careful spending and allotment of ESSER grants, and then the careful rolling them into the budget over the last several years.
Dr. Balch, I would just note that this year's budget process has also been really involved. I mean, there have been other years where the budget conversations tend to talk around the edges of the budget. And this year, this board and this community have talked about central concerns: class size, staffing levels, security and safety. And I appreciate the community members and this board and this thoughtful conversation about things that are in fact central to our mission. The budget is coming in $250,000 less than what we presented to you, but I walk away feeling encouraged by the quality of conversation that this board has with this community in making thoughtful decisions. And I expect we will have the same quality conversation with the Board of Finance and at the town meeting when we continue to move this forward. It really is the way that this process is supposed to work, and I appreciate all of your time and energy and thoughtfulness in moving this forward.
So I'm going to summarize what we've discussed so far and then ask if any board member has any additional discussions they want to hold around any additions to our considerations. We are considering a reduction in this proposed budget by 4 safety monitors, which will equal a reduction of $145,000 in the budget. We are proposing the removal of the additional proposed elementary teacher at Calvin Leet. That reduction would be a $65,000 reduction to the proposed budget. And again, it is our recommendation that what happens then is that a 4th grade teacher is moved into that position at Leet, and the 3 kindergarten classes that exist now become 2 first grade classes. A reduction in the pension line of $21,000. This is actually due to updated information about what we are expected to pay, and that updated information allows us to reduce from 21. And then a reduction of $30,000 in the site improvement line.
30?
Yeah. $30,000.
So it's, okay, got it. Leaving 68.
Yes.
Leaving
Yes.
60 in.
Okay.
That equates to a proposed reduction of $261,000. The calculation, that reduction would then make the proposed budget that goes to the Board of Finance, if we vote to approve this, at a 5.08% increase. Are there any additional discussion points, reductions, additions, anything that any of my colleagues want to consider tonight at this time?
Linda, may I just ask for the motion? Did you do the subtraction? Do you have the new bottom line budget number?
Bottom line budget would be $72,157,151.
72, 157, 150.
And that's the difference of 261?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Given that I'm not hearing any additional conversation, I am going to entertain a motion that this Board of Education votes on a proposed budget to move forward to the Board of Finance in the amount of $72,157,151, which represents a 5.08% increase from the 2023-2024 budget. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so that is 8 in favor, a unanimous vote of the members present. One last round of thank yous to the administration for supporting our many, many questions, for the detailed budget book that allowed us to pour item by item. Great appreciation to my colleagues for the thoughtful manner in which everyone dove into this, reflected in the numerous detailed questions that I filtered through to the administration.
Dr. Ballard-Tracy, do we want to give a timeline update?
I absolutely want to give a timeline update. Thank you.
So we will update the budget materials to reflect a new 3-page summary with the changes made that were approved here tonight. This budget will move forward as the Board of Education's approved budget now, and we'll begin preparing to support you as you present it to the Board of Finance.
And per our budget timeline, this budget will be presented to the Board of Finance on Thursday, February 15th. I expect, and I should have looked this up, that that happens in the community center. The Board of Finance, per our timeline, will be holding a public hearing on the budget on March 5th, 2024. And then we'll be scheduling, they have scheduled here on the timeline a workshop on March 7th and a workshop on March 11th, if necessary. So they very typically schedule a public hearing and
you say
then
the 15th
2
was?
meetings. But note throughout that process that they only hold that last meeting if they have not been able to determine a final decision prior to then. I encourage members of the community to look at the calendar on the Town of Guilford website, which will update times, locations, and give this information to the community as they move forward. That being said, any last comments before I ask to adjourn? No, all right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, thank you. Thank you to the community, those of you who are watching and those of you who have joined us tonight.